Welcome to FemLead, the podcast on female leadership and role models. Prepare to feel inspired and better equipped to navigate your career path. I am Alexandra Chabotaru, your host, and together with my guests, we will tackle a new field of work in each episode. The aim of this podcast is to deep dive into career perspectives and strategies to navigate your desired path for success. Enjoy! Today's episode is a special interview focused on the world of design thinking. My next guest is an expert in innovation, design thinking, and design sprints in Japanese. She wakes up each day excited to ignite creativity and innovation at the Japanese workplace by equipping people with tools for change. She serves on the board of directors of Met Conecta, a consulting company based in Mexico, as an advisor for innovation and strategic partnership in the Latin American market. Equally, she is passionate about volunteering, which is actually how we met. She is a member of the Rotary Club of Berlin International, and among others, she is the past vice chair of the Rotary International Joint Committee for Young Leaders and Alumni Engagement. That was a long one. She is also a member of the Australian and New Zealand Chamber of Commerce in Japan, contributing to the creation of new industry knowledge and exchanging ideas around the new world of work. So, without further ado, for today's session, please welcome Brittany Arthur. Welcome, Brittany.
Alexandra, thank you so much for not only your effort in my introduction, but also thank you so much for the invitation. It's such a pleasure to be here, and moreover, it's really an honor to support you as well.
Thank you so much, Brittany. It's really funny that we get to talk now in this setup. Exactly a year ago, we were in Hamburg at an international conference, Rotary International Conference, and that was an amazing experience as well. And now we're talking about our careers and about, advice for others. So thank you again for accepting to do this interview with me. I'm sure listeners will find it very, very interesting.
Pleasure is all mine.
You also have a podcast, right?
Right, yes. Where we talk about similar things, but we lead essentially unconventional conversations around doing business with and in Japan. Mm-hmm. So exactly what you're trying to do is to really just modernize the dialogue around doing business in Japan. For a very long time, it was, hand over a business card with two hands and kind of these things that are kind of very 80s that are very outdated. So what I've tried to do is bring a conversation around how to do business in modern day Japan, in modern times, which is very much what you're trying to do here with your Female Role Model podcast.
That sounds really, really good. I saw it and I was like, this is becoming more and more, popular to talk about your own experiences. So I really love when people start sharing their knowledge, because I think this is how you build upon your knowledge and just become a better professional. So I would like to start by sharing with everybody the fact that you have your own consultancy called Design Thinking Japan. But right now you're actually calling us from, not from Japan, but from the Western part of the world.
Yeah, that's right. As I'm sure many people have begun 2020, as in the year 2020, and whoever's listening to this, whether it's in the present or far in the future, 2020 will be known as the year of the coronavirus. And many people's lives, many people's plans had to change really quite quickly. And I certainly was also one of those people. So as much as I'm not currently physically in Japan, I'm still very much active and trying to serve my clients as best as I can remotely, which is a little challenging, having to get up very early or stay up very late. But at the same time, we're very lucky to be able to serve our clients remotely.
That sounds good. And, as long as you do it to just enhance the process for all your clients anyway, I think it's a great setup. Tell me more about your background to start with. So, as much as I know about Brittany, you have your own consulting company focusing on design thinking. You have a podcast. You are very active in volunteering. But I want to know, how did you decide to have your own company? And prior to that, what is your education? What's your background? You're from Australia, correct?
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Well, that's kind of, so there are some people that grew up and said that I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to run my own business. For me, it wasn't necessarily that. For me, it was almost like an organic development because the skills that I had, the interests that I had, I was not able to leverage in one particular company. So if we if we zoom out and go from the beginning, my love for Japan in particularly began really almost when I was still in elementary school student. So I remember I think I must have been 10 years old or so. My Japanese teacher came into the room and she wrote her name on the board. And she began on the right-hand side and started from top to bottom. And that's how she wrote her name. And I just thought, wow, one day I want to be able to do that. There was just something inside me that's like, that's just so beautiful. It's so different. I'm from Australia, which if you think about the world map is very much isolated from many other places. So having this kind of exotic, if we're going back to whatever it was, 97, 98, and having this connection with something so different was really one of those first moments that my eyes really began to spark, where I thought there's something really interesting here. Obviously, just thinking that Japanese is cool is really not enough to be able to, build a career or build a business on. So, fast forward, I studied Japanese at university. I did a double bachelor's degree of business in Japanese because I had identified my passion for a very long time as being business. I really felt that business was really that place that I loved, where I really saw people thrive. But at the same time, I saw there was, an equal amount of challenge. So the way that kind of developed was after my university studies, I recognized that maybe my passion for business is really a passion for people, which, was very true. And after that, so crazy things happened, like in 2011, there was a Japanese earthquake. I was on the 20th floor in Tokyo. I was immediately relocated from the company that I was working for to Germany. At that time, I had an opportunity from Rotary to study further with an ambassadorial scholarship. And I thought this is the moment that I kind of have to pivot, right? Because I'd spent my entire life building this kind of bilateral Australian-Japanese career, but now all of a sudden I have to do something different. So what I wanted to do was make sure that even in the face of change, even in the face of adversity, I wanted to make sure that my next step would be a valuable one. And I think that's even a very valuable lesson for people today, that no matter what your next step is, even if you didn't plan it, just make sure that it's something that might be able to bring you new opportunities for the future. So I thought, if I can't stay in Japan and I have to go somewhere else, then maybe let's go deeper into this passion for people. And that is when I started researching and learning more about design thinking, because I was working always in an international setting with be it Fortune 500 companies. We'd have, cross-border workshops and things like that. And I just saw sometimes a workshop would be successful and sometimes it wouldn't. And I thought there's got to be a reason why. We can't just walk into these extremely expensive workshops, not only money-wise, but time-wise. People are flown across the globe. They're taking out 4 or 5 days of their week. This is really a lot of investment. So I thought there's got to be a better way to be able to manage our outcomes. And that's when I learned about design thinking. And that was really when my passion came together for the focus on people, the focus on business, but also the focus on technology. So as much as that doesn't sound necessarily like a linear progression, it was very different. There were some bumps along the road, some surprises, but at the same time, the passion that I had for people, the passion that I had to make the world and the world that we work in a better place was certainly there along the way.
I really like how you started by sharing your fascination for Japan. I lived there myself for 6 months, and I found it extremely hard to get a grasp of what Japan is. I think it's its own universe. It's extremely, extremely focused on politeness. People are absolutely brilliant. But obviously, if you don't know the language, there's a huge barrier. I actually had the opportunity to have an internship in a Japanese company, and I found it so interesting because not many people could speak to me in English, but they were really trying to accommodate me. And I felt so, welcomed, and I felt also bad that I couldn't really thank them more than arigatou gozaimasu every time I could. And it was really an interesting setup, and I'm so grateful I had that. And going a bit deeper into that, why did you decide to create this bridge specifically with Japan when, of course, you had the fascination, but you could have also continued with, let's say, Germany once you moved there. So, what made you continue in this path?
Absolutely. So maybe to give people a little bit of context, design thinking is a methodology which is based in human centricity, which means rather than just developing a really cool gadget or developing a really cool service and then going out and finding people, we do the opposite, which is we go, we find people, we listen to them, and then we build according to their needs. That doesn't necessarily mean, people say, well, how do you manage the, Henry Ford analogy of, well, if you ask your customers what they want, then, they just ask for a faster horse. What we try to do is listen to their pain, but also use subject matter experts to innovate and to ideate, on new ideas about how we can develop those services. So design thinking is an iterative approach where we just work for people to bring them just better goods and services, really. So that's kind of what design thinking is. That being said, the process was developed or popularized probably in the West, around the early 2010s. So 2010, 2011 was really where you saw kind of design thinking really start to peak with, companies like IDEO, the founding of the D School in Stanford, and also in the Hasselblatt and the D School in Germany. That was when we really saw the Western kind of take off. That being said, Japan, I would say if we even think about design thinking right now, Japan 2020, design thinking and that ability to innovate, that openness, I would compare that to probably 2014 abroad. So the reason why I decided to go the Japanese path rather than the German path or the English path, which was much more developed, I had many more peers, I had much more material available to me, and I thought, well, the differentiating factor here really is my ability to speak Japanese. And so if I don't do it, if I don't stand up, if I don't contribute to a modern dialogue around innovation, if I don't contribute and lead conversations that might be able to move the needle about doing work in Japan, who is? Who's going to do that? Because it requires so much. It requires not only an understanding of English, because even if you're a Japanese person and you're bringing, knowledge back home, you need to be able to speak English well enough to be able to understand that and then bring it back and then translate it. Or if you're a foreigner, you need to be able to speak Japanese well enough to be able to translate it. So I thought there was just something inside of me that said the Western world, the Western environment will be okay, with or without my contribution. But there was something inside me that said the Japanese path might not be. Maybe not. Maybe there's not going to be that person that's going to stand up. Maybe there's not going to be that person who's going to begin these conversations. So, and if there's one thing that I've learned both in my career, but also certainly in our work with Rotary and Rotaract, has been if we don't do it, well, who is? And so the potential for impact was what drew me to Japan.
Wow, I really love that. And one of the reasons why I wanted to create this podcast and showcase role models in all communities that I could get myself into was, change makers are our neighbors, our colleagues, our co-workers. And why not shed some light into their journeys? And I feel when you said you had a calling saying, if I don't do this, maybe nobody else will. So why not do it myself? I feel that's the exact reason why I wanted to talk to you today. Kind of understand, how do you take charge of your own journey and how do you say, okay, you know what? I'm actually going to invest in this. I have the possibility. I have the skills. I have the context to do it. You know the language. That's absolutely amazing. And then you did it. And what is your company doing today? How do you spend your days now?
Okay, so I'll maybe answer that in two parts. So what we do, our portfolio of services, is that we support companies in achieving their innovation aspirations in Japan. One of the ways that we do that is we use design thinking. So right now we're in this, we're all in lockdown, we're in quarantine. So the work that we've done has moved from face-to-face interaction to online, but still very much of what we do, that ability to bring different stakeholders into a room and leverage their knowledge, leverage their opinions, leverage their interests to create, better, more robust products and services, that's still very much the case. But we've had to adjust and will continue to adjust in the future with developing requirements and also, specifications that governments are setting for certain face-to-face interactions. So what we do will certainly remain the same, which is that we want to help our companies achieve their innovation aspirations. But how we do it, we're listening to the market and we're listening to government recommendations and developing as we go along.
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea nowadays. I want to know also, and I think it will be very interesting also for the listeners to know a bit more about how do you think design thinking fits into a company setup? You said you help companies with their innovation efforts. Can you be more specific on where does design thinking stand about that? Where is it that we find design thinking as a key concept to innovate?
Okay, sure, of course, thank you. This is obviously a real question on everyone's mind, and there's, depending on the dialogue around design thinking, it's probably similar to what Agile probably had when Agile also came to be popular, was that the idea that, okay, everything that we've ever done until now is useless, and we only have to do this thing. And that's not really it. Design thinking, the way that I like to describe it, is an and tool. It's use whatever you have and design thinking. So if we think about how that works out in a company, there's probably two main areas that really come to mind. One is your ability to build a creatively confident workforce, right? So what does that mean? That means that we want employees in the company to not only think creatively, right? Because design thinking is essentially a creative methodology, but the benefit of something like a methodology and it being design thinking is that it gives you a set of methods. So rather than saying to someone, go and be creative, and people looking at you thinking, what does that mean? How am I supposed to be creative? What we do is we say, we've got an ideation worksheet, for example, or we've got an ideation process. And for 10 minutes, we want you to think about this. Now think of ideas. And for 10 minutes, we want you to do this. And now think about this. So the idea is that we assist the organization in developing that creative confidence, but not just through this kind of give it your best shot kind of motivational talks. What we try to do is really give them those tools that they can lead meaningful human conversations. So another example is, for a very long time, performance reviews in Japan went something like this. How's your last 6 months? Very good. I'm very busy. Okay, great. If there's anything you need, don't hesitate to reach out. Okay, great. See you later. See you in 6 months. And that was kind of like the entire performance review. So what we did is that we went in, and rather than saying to a manager, we want you to go in and speak more humanly to your employees, where a Japanese manager would think, what? What we did is we went in and we said, we've got this tool, it's called a journey map. And usually we use it for a customer journey. But what we're going to do today is we're going to use it in the place of your employee. So we're going to plot the 6 months along a timeline. And then as we go through each and every month, we're going to ask you to inquire to them and to explore with them how this month was. And then we want them to indicate on this journey map whether that, January was an overall positive month or an overall negative month. And then that will give you more insight into how this person is feeling, as well as giving you real conversation starters. So this is also really helpful in organizations, as much as it is helpful like in a country like Japan, where people aren't very open with how they speak and they're very reserved. This is also very relevant if you have a team of engineers who are, generally speaking, more introverted, or if you're speaking with people who are, if your team is an international team, maybe this person doesn't feel as confident in in the language of the land that you are. So what we try to do is really use design thinking to create a creatively confident human workforce. That's really number one. The second thing is that we use design thinking for is to create new business opportunities. So for a very long time, and what we'll see now, for example, if we take 2020, people, were allocated budgets for 2020 based on forecasts. These forecasts would not have been reached. So the budgets, therefore, will also have to change. And so what companies would often, have to look at is, okay, let's cost save, right? And they begin this kind of idea of squeezing the towel, squeeze out more money, squeeze out more money. The difference is the money that you'll acquire through cost saving will be nowhere near the kind of resources or the kind of capital that you'll need within the organization to be able to survive. It won't even be close. So what we want to do is we want to create new business opportunities within the organization and also, between their partners. So it's this idea of creating both a creatively confident organization as well as an organization that's able to bring new, innovative business solutions into the market that can, do all those kinds of things, particularly, inject new cash into the organization that will help them achieve other initiatives.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I really like that. And I would like to go a bit deeper into what are some of the challenges that we should expect or at least discuss as key to this process.
Okay. There's obviously, quite a few challenges. That being said, is that more often than not, they're human challenges. And so the number one thing that I've found when, and this will be different from country to country and company to company, but I would say one main thing that's probably different in Japan is that when you're introducing something new, and design thinking is considered new and it is considered a Western concept, what we want to do is try to find a way that we can create an analogy or a parallel that it doesn't feel like for the Japanese that this is some kind of copy and paste Western model, right? So what we try to do is draw analogies that mean something to the Japanese. So we kind of draw the analogy that innovation and design thinking is for a limited time, because the Japanese, people think that the Japanese are kind of negative in the sense that they don't try out new things. But the problem is in Japan, the issue is in Japan, is that once they decide to do something, all of the resources go to that. And so they want to be sure when they decide. Whereas maybe in the West, we tend to start fast, but we also, trickle off very quickly, particularly, in Australia or places like America. You'll have these kind of huge starts, and then all of a sudden there's no one left after 2 weeks, and you think, hang on, what happened? Whereas Japan is the opposite. They'll spend 6 months talking about it, and then they'll launch, right? And so it's a very different approach. So what we try to do in Japan is draw this analogy that it's for a short period of time. An innovation sprint is for a short period of time. You can be crazy, you can do crazy things. And we draw an analogy that means something to them, which is we use karaoke. So we say, karaoke is a place where the Japanese go for 2 hours. They can drink as much as they like. They can vomit in the on their boss, like whatever. And it's kind of okay on Monday, right? So what we do is we say it's kind of like that, right? So rather than saying there's this thing called innovation, what we do is sometimes we don't even have to use the word design thinking. Sometimes we don't even have to use the word innovation. And we try to bring this concept into something that's meaningful for Japan. So there's obviously a lot of challenges, but it begins with trying to find a commonality rather than trying to find all the things that are different.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And continuing on that path, you've mentioned very well just a few seconds ago, the challenges of this crisis. Well, for you at least, you obviously moved most of your work remote. But what do you feel are some of the challenges of design thinking as a concept moving forward? Companies, will they continue to invest in this field? Do you feel like it's still something that will be part of budgets and, team allocations and so on?
Design thinking is really a process to get to somewhere, right? And so it's not necessarily probably, and this even ties back to the original question, being what are the challenges? If management or leadership sees design thinking as kind of like an addition to a process, then this is kind of where you start to lose the importance. Whereas design thinking is not necessarily an addition to the process, it actually is the foundation. So design thinking is also based on, rapid prototyping, and also the idea we have divergent and convergent conversations. And there's really so much richness about running a design thinking sprint that can help you set goals very quickly, can help you gain clarity very quickly, and also prioritize. And I think right now, during this COVID-19 situation, the number one thing on people's minds is what are our priorities? Because they've changed, they've shifted, and they even might continue to shift. And design thinking is a process that will help you in a very short period of time with very low investment decide how do we want to spend our money over the next 6 months, 1 year, 5 years. So I would encourage companies, if you were to move forward, especially during this period, I would encourage you to look deeply at your priorities, but also you have to move in a timely fashion. You can't spend 3 months analyzing your priorities now. Things will change. Mm-hmm. So using rapid collaborative methodologies like design thinking will certainly be one of those accelerators that will help companies set their strategy quicker. And once you have your strategy set, you can communicate that to your team, and you can very much help your organization move through this crisis and even grow through this crisis.
I love how you said that. So design thinking is the foundation of moving towards a direction. It's not something that needs to be put on top of an existing strategy or an existing process already. I really like that. And I would like to make a correlation with, designing your own career path. I've heard of, using design thinking for better your career chances or for navigating your own career. What do you think about using design thinking for planning your own career or your own personal life?
Right. I think it's a great idea, really, because design thinking is a process where you begin with a person in mind, right? And how often do we begin a career with a title in mind, or with a job in mind, or with the end in mind? And that infers that things are going to be the same in 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, whenever you retire. This is an assumption. And if we've ever needed a wake up to just remind ourselves that, hey, things can really change overnight, well, 2020 has certainly been that for us.
Definitely.
So using design thinking, which is a human-centric approach to your career, is a great way for you to map your career according to your values. Very often people will begin a career based on what they think it is, or what they think it would look like, or what other people might think of them if they achieve it. But taking a step back and going deeply into empathy, going deeply into your why, will help you see that whether you're working in Japan, which is what happened to me, whether I was working in Japan or whether I was working in Germany, very much, there was very much a parallel between those two. And I remember in the early days when I went from Japan to Germany, I remember being in Germany feeling deeply depressed, thinking this is not where I want to be. This was not my career, because I was too focused on what I was doing rather than why I was doing it. If I zoomed out and I took that design thinking approach to, why am I doing what I'm doing? Oh, well, I'm here because I want to be that, bridge between cultures, that I want to contribute to a new dialogue around this bilateral relationship. In those early days when I was in Germany, I could have been just as happy as I was in Japan, but it was because I was missing that human element, that I was looking too much on the what, that I lost my way. And I think, especially in 2020, people might be thinking, I haven't been able to have my graduation ceremony, or I didn't have my company induction, or I didn't have that promotion, or things like that. I think take a moment and realizing that your career can be designed by you. And I think that's powerful. And designing your career, it's not luck. You can sit down and you can write out your ideas, and you can write down and you can make a plan. Of course, you need to be you need to be able to pivot quickly, and you need to be able to gather feedback and iterate and things like that. But it's not something you need to leave to chance. You can certainly sit down and start plotting that.
I really like the natural transition to the advice part of our discussion, because I really wanted to ask you for advice. What is the advice you would like to give to aspiring individuals who want to follow your path? Maybe there's some information that you obviously found through your career that you didn't know when you started, and that's very valuable to share. And while you do that, if you have any resources that people should check out while looking more into design thinking.
Mm-hmm. So there's in 2011, when I was an intern for a very large Fortune 500 company, I was a Fortune 500 company, but it was in Japan. And in Japan, if you are an intern, you probably only have about 45 minutes of work a day, and the rest of the day your boss hopes that you keep yourself busy and don't complain, and he won't, and it's always a he, and he won't make any complaints that you're not really doing anything, and you're just supposed to shut up and just get along with it. So I had my afternoons always free for learning. And so I remember in 2011, there was two authors that really contributed to I would say, changing my lens. And one was an author by the name of Dan Pink, who's written books, exploring things like everything from how to sell as a human, all the way through to left brain, right brain conversations. And more or less the left brain, right brain conversation was that for a very long time, the analysts of the world led the world. But now is really because of this was easy when we knew what the problems were, and then we could find a way to solve them. But we're now in a world where we don't even know what we don't know, and so his argument was that if you're able to leverage both your analytic side as well as your creative side, that you're actually going to position yourself to lead these kinds of conversations. So those two, and the second one was Ken Robinson. So anything from Ken Robinson, like The Element, things like that, anything from him. If you don't have time to read the book, just watch any of his TED Talks. These two for me were really the ones that really helped me redirect what I was doing. In terms of advice, I would encourage anyone who's listening to take what I say and then also critically think about their environment and their field and how appropriate it is for them. But I'll speak about it in two ways. The first way, if you're beginning, and the second one, if you're further along in your career. When you're at the beginning of your career, the first thing that you say is, I don't have anything to say, or I don't know anything, or I don't, where do I start? I think at this point in time, the most important thing for you to do is, rather than act as a subject matter expert, simply document your experiences. So for example, if you're working and even read books, and then you can, share it in an article or something like that. I just think it's very, very important, as early as you can in your career, become connected with an idea. Think about what it is that you want to be known for and write about it, contribute to it, get involved in LinkedIn groups, have that conversation, and just make it a part of your everyday life. And if you don't have anything to say because you haven't started, then simply document your journey. Your first article can be, this is my day one of me wanting to become an astronaut, or this is day one of me, wanting to, open my own business in wherever, so I would recommend really taking that part of documentation now. And this is only going to become more and more important as the younger that you get, right? So we didn't really have LinkedIn really, when we were going through university. But if you're going through university right now and you're not, for example, uploading your essays onto LinkedIn, you're missing an opportunity. This is an opportunity that you can start uploading your essays and and sharing thoughts. This is just as much material as anything else.
Yeah, I agree. I'm an avid LinkedIn user, and I use each opportunity of my learning to share it with others and say, look, this is my experience and this is what I learned from it. And this is the process I follow. These are the steps. And if you want to read into, I actually enjoyed this book. And I always get feedback like, this was very useful. And I'm sure people who comment like that, they have so much knowledge to share as well. So, just thinking about enhancing and, this idea of network sharing, it's so powerful. So I'm very happy you've mentioned that. I think it's a great piece of advice.
Yeah. So I would definitely encourage you, if you're early in your career, to just get started as much as you can. And then now, for those that are a little bit further in their career, I would say, and one thing, it's almost like the analogy of, when we show up to an event. If you have those opportunities, those real I never saw that coming. This is the most amazing opportunity. Sometimes they come and we didn't plan them. Sometimes a series of events happen to take place at a certain time, and somehow you end up where you are, right? And I think it's almost, arrogant to assume that you can, reverse engineer how to become a, Laurel, no, any kind of winner or, whatever, I think it's really just about, for me, it's the opposite. So what I mean by that is that if you're in your career now and you're looking for that next opportunity, for me, that's directly correlated with how much you're giving into your industry. The more that you put into your industry, and maybe that's through, and not everyone's comfortable with audio or video, then you can write. If you like talking but you don't like being on camera, then do a podcast. If you like being on camera, do a video, whatever it is. But the more that the world knows that this is your line of work, the more likely the universe and the world is to come back to you when there's an opportunity. If you're sitting in your room or in your apartment, and the only place in the world that it says what you do is either on your website or on LinkedIn, just as a line, it's not going to be enough. Because this is really just about those unique opportunities, those opportunities where you thought, wow, I had no idea this is something that I could be doing. That comes through the world connecting those dots that you've planted, or even those seeds that you've planted. And then that's really where those ideas or where those opportunities grow.
I really love that. I also like the very, natural good vibe that you share when you talk about your journey. I feel like you're in a very good spot from a professional perspective, because you followed your passion and you've discovered your passion early on, and you've documented your passion, and you've said, you know what, this is actually something that might work if I just offer it the necessary amount of effort and investment. So I think this was very, very useful. Do you have any final thoughts to share that maybe you missed, or something that you want people to really remember?
Sure. So probably the point probably might be, just as you mentioned, that it sounded like that this was definitely on my time schedule. I'm by nature a fast mover, and by nature incredibly impatient, but at the same time, I can wait 10 years for an opportunity and know that it's no problem. Like, I know that this is going to take 10 years and I can commit to it. So the thing that I would say is, if you're living a non-linear life, right? That means if you're living abroad, if you're in a new industry, or if you're living abroad and in a new industry, your life is going to look different. So you're going to look at your friends, they're going to be 32 years old, and they're going to be married, and they're going to have kids, and they're going to have a house, and you're thinking, this is not my life. You're going to have to look past that, and you're going to have to say, my life is for me. This is what I chose. Every element that makes you unique or that makes you special contributes to you living a non-linear life. So if you just live abroad, then you're still, you're only one step away from living a linear life. If you're living abroad in a new industry, well, then you're 2 steps. If you're living abroad in a new industry as an entrepreneur, well, then you're 3 steps, and then you start moving away. So the only thing that I would say is, this journey that you're building, you probably won't be responsible for how it looks. Right? And what that means, that doesn't mean that you just sit back and take your foot off the accelerator and say, oh, what will be, let God, Jesus take the wheel kind of thing. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that the life that you're building, the business that you're going to build, is going to look very different. So your job is to just constantly show up as much as you can for your community, as much as you can for your industry, and as much as you can for yourself. And know that your opportunities may not look like the person next to you, but that's okay, because maybe they took a different path. So if your path is that non-linear path, then understand that you're going to, gift yourself with a certain element of patience, a certain element, don't look left and right and say, okay, well, what about this person? What about that person? Yeah, but have they lived 10 years abroad, and to be able to are they financially independent? Have they paid all their bills? No. So just know that this journey is your journey, and that life abroad, or life, a non-linear life, it doesn't have incremental developments. It will explode overnight, right? And then you'll have a year or 2 years where you think, actually, I'm probably regressing here. Nothing's moving. If anything, maybe I'm going backwards. Maybe I throw in the towel. Maybe I'll go home. And then all of a sudden, overnight, you'll jump 10 levels. You know what I mean? So there's not this step-by-step kind of development when you live a non-linear life. So knowing that, be patient with yourself and give yourself time to reap the benefits of the seeds that you sow. Don't give up after 6 months. Our 6 months, i.e. for those people that live abroad or run their own businesses, our 6 months might need to be 3 years. If someone says, just see how you go for 6 months, which is a very Australian thing to say, see how you go for 6 months. If it doesn't work out, don't worry. If you live a non-linear life, your 6 months is 3 years. So you're going to need to invest in something you feel really good about, because if you don't do it, you don't have that luxury of, if it doesn't work, I'll just go home to my parents, or I'll move in with my sister, or whatever. This is a real bet for you. So you've got to invest. It's got to be something that you've got to say your best yes to, which means, can I hang on in there with this idea if it doesn't work for 3 years? And if the answer is no, don't do it.
And with this beautiful, beautiful advice and very thoughtful ending here, I want to thank you so much for joining this podcast. I want to thank you for taking the time and for sharing all this advice. I love the fact that you've lived and experienced so many cultures, because it just gives such a nice understanding of how we can, succeed in life. So thank you so much, Brittany.
Alexandra, it was an absolute pleasure. It's a pleasure to be here with you. It's a pleasure to share my story through you. And I really applaud the work that you're doing, and I encourage you to continue, because the stories that you're sharing really do make the world a better place. So thank you so much for your effort as well.
Thank you so much. And thank you to everybody listening. I hope you've enjoyed today's session, and stay tuned for more inspiring sessions with female role models. I hope you felt inspired to take charge of your next career move. Remember to review this podcast and share your comments. Thank you.